Hello. Okay. This video is essentially going to be a little bit about the Japanese herbivore men. Uh, I've heard them be compared to MGTOWs on a number of occasions, and to some extent, I would have to say that is somewhat accurate. In my experience, one of the big issues in Japan is you go out and you try to find a girl after you establish yourself. This being one of the first generations since the war to essentially have no or very limited upward mobility prospects. Most Japanese males are not going to feel confident enough to even approach a woman. One of the reasons for this is, as part of the result of Japanese culture, the woman is supposed to actually take into account her prospective suitor's position, drive, career, engage that against that of his father. There are a number of reasons to go and do this, but one of the primary reasons is it's essentially a comparison. Well, this is what this person grew up with. Does this person have the drive necessary to even attain this or get further? A similar story across the planet with females. But in Japan, you still have this ingrained concept and culture of honor and honoring one's family. And success and growth is, how can I put it? One only grows when one overcomes. Within the culture, you grow by striving and persevering and overcoming obstacles that are in your way. Many of the obstacles that are in the way of many of these men in Japan cannot be overcome for a variety of reasons, depending on the industry. Well, as a result, you can kind of see where that's going. They see themselves as failures. And as a result of this, oddly enough, this is kind of where the whole MGTOW thing starts coming in. A number of these other men growing up are seeing these guys, they're single, they have money, they can do whatever the hell they want. They have cars, video games, girlfriends. Yes, girlfriends, the herbivore men. The Japanese birth rate is dropping, and dropping like a stone. But that does not mean that they're not having sex. There are a number of cultural conflicts, especially when it comes to sex. But a vast majority generally has to do with, is one honoring one's family, and if that's the case, he's going traditionally, if that's the case, he's the one that the woman is going to choose. As a result of their current divorce laws and some of their traditions that they're stuck in, it can get kind of wonky. For example, after a divorce, it's still fairly common for the ex-husband and ex-wife to still live in the same house. As you can imagine, a fair number of conflicts arising from new boyfriends or girlfriends showing up. Part of this is in response to trying to maintain a stable environment for the child, but mainly it's more cost effective. It's essentially at its very root, it is essentially a economic choice. Now, part of this gets to be somewhat interesting as a result of the elderly in Japan are living older, well, than just about anybody else. This becomes an issue when they have children that are not married. I think this is one of the reasons why it's getting as much attention as it is. Japan is running into a budget crisis, a population crisis. They need babies. They need a workforce in order to support the elderly in part of their socialist medical system. So they're, from what I've seen, it's almost as though they are attempting to shame all these men who already feel like crap, and they're looking at these guys that are essentially free, and for them becoming a herbivore man, which is a horrible way to try to describe it, the Japanese women look at it as that if you are a carnivore man, you crave, you desire, you pursue, you consume. A herbivore man is just a guy who's, well, like a cow. You just out in pasture munching, and you really don't care about much. There has seemed to be some confusion on that one. But a lot of these guys are turning to electronic companionship. They're doing so because they are looking for a connection. They're looking for a relationship that they feel is not going to judge them and criticize them on every minor detail. This almost seems to be a pastime of many of the women in Japan. They were taught by their grandmothers and their mothers to nag and push, and at the same time as you're nagging and pushing, you're also praising your husband. So that way, it's a mind fuck. You're praising the guy while at the same time sticking it in his head to go and do the dishes or take out the trash. They were essentially trained and taught to do these things, and they didn't really have the whole issue of first wave feminism. They didn't go through the initial women's suffrage movement. They eventually had to, and they got the right to vote, but it wasn't in the way it happened over here. So they essentially skipped that portion of feminism and went straight into second wave, well, 20th century second wave feminism. And from there, a bunch of these chicks went out, dated, did whatever the hell they wanted. You know, just like over here. Well, a lot of these guys that are still feeling like crap. Keep in mind, this has been going on since 1991. Okay, the Japanese economy tanked. They tried to print themselves out of debt, and they're still suffering from it to this day. This has been a 20-year-long recession in Japan. It's horrible. So you have an entire generation. You now have 35-year-old men who've been sneered at, snickered at, picked at, and criticized by all these women doing what their mothers and their grandmothers taught them to do. As well as these women being hit with second wave feminism and adopting it. Dude, that it took hold quick. But getting back on point, they adopted it. They took it in. They made it part of themselves in such a way that they went out and got jobs. They went out and got educations in biology, medical, nanotech, you name it. They went out and pursued these things. And I know a lot of people want to try and say, well, we need to get the American system to work like the, education system. We need it to be as effective as the education system in Japan. No, it can't work over here. All right? It can't work. It is not PC enough. You literally have to fill out an application and take an acceptance exam just to go to high school. All right, it's very competitive, and they don't like to drop standards. We would not be able to do that over here. And over here, it's all about time, how many hours is spent in the classroom. Over there, not so much. Essentially, as soon as you finish all the work, you take all of the tests and you prove you understand all of the material you are supposed to learn in that grade level. You move on up to the next grade. We cannot do that here because it would then be even more likely to have 8-year-olds as sophomores and making all of the 18-year-old sophomores feel retarded. So they come from a very competitive environment, and they've been sneered at, snickered at, picked at, and criticized by all these women because they cannot compare. Their achievements cannot compare to what their fathers had achieved in the decades earlier, during a boom era. So these guys are essentially depressed. And it was out of this depression that this whole concept of herbivore men started being called into account as a national shaming tactic to try and force these guys to buck up and reach for the stars when there are no stars to be reached, which just makes them even more depressed and more likely to get lost in their video games. That's a little bit on my take of the Japanese thing. Have a nice night. Sorry that I started ranting so much.